Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening or good morning to all of you, depending on the time zone in which you live. We are pleased to have so many people in this meeting from different time zones all over the world. I am Shakira Mohammed of Trinidad and Tobago, a teacher for the past 15 years. And this is our 157th edition of our Zoom public meeting. And we sincerely thank all of you who have contributed in whatever way to the success of this ongoing Pan-Indo-Caribbean and Pan-Indian Diaspora global project. For 156 unbroken continuous weeks, we have been here every single Sunday. And in the past 3 years, 3 months and 1 week, we have featured 636 presenters from all parts of the world, speaking on 156 topics. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a weekly forum being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, a legally registered research and publishing company operating since 2010. And like today, we often partner with the Amina Ghafoor Institute for the study of indentureship and its legacies, led by Professor David Davidine. Today's edition of our program is being supported by the Sport and Culture Fund of the Office of the Prime Minister of the Government of Trinidad and Tobago. During the month of May and now into June, we are celebrating Indian history and heritage. So in order to continue this weekly program and to make it bigger and better, we are asking you to kindly give us your suggestions as well as donations. And you can contact Dr. Kumar Mahabir for details. Ladies and gentlemen, our moderator for this evening or tonight is Shalama Mohammed, the co-director of this Zoom platform, who is a business teacher and researcher from Trinidad and Tobago. She obtained her master's degree in business psychology from Franklin University in the USA. Shalama, welcome.
Thank you, Shakir. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Namaste, and a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for choosing to be here with us at this time. This public meeting will take the usual form of a panel presentation with speakers presenting, followed by Q&A, except for one conversation at the beginning of the program. This meeting is being recorded live and would be uploaded later on YouTube permanently for posterity. We are live streaming as well on the YouTube channel of the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. So I want to say welcome to all viewers on YouTube. To avoid intrusions from trolls, Ravin Ramsingh, our IT manager, has muted everyone. Speakers, please do not admit anyone, do not unmute anyone, and please do not allow anyone to share your screen. Thank you so much for cooperating. Over the next 2 hours, we will be hearing from Indian elders in the diaspora about post-indentureship days, the 10th in this series. Reunion Island commemorated 195 years of Indian indentureship on Saturday, June 3rd. And tomorrow, June 5th, Suriname will commemorate 150 years since Indian indentured immigrants first arrived there. We continue with these conversations because our elders are a wealth of knowledge and life experiences. These distinguished individuals connect us with our ancestral traditions, and in highlighting their rich life stories, we hope to honor their struggles, achievements, and contributions, as well as instill a sense of pride and cultural continuity within families and communities in the Indian diaspora. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring on our first speaker, and this is Mr. Bobby Perumal of South Africa. He's 87 years old. He was born in 1936 in Durban, and as a teenager, he excelled in athletics while helping to sell savories prepared by his mom. He's a retired postmaster general and now serves in voluntary organizations. So Mr. Perumal is here with us in the audience, but we will have a pre-recorded conversation between him and Dr. Kogilam Parthab Archery, who is also South African. So I'll ask Ravin to please play that pre-recorded presentation now. And at the end of the presentation, we will pause for questions, which you all can pose to him. Ravin?
Good evening, Shalima and Dr. Mahabir and all attendees present online this evening. It is my pleasure to greet you from South Africa. Due to load shedding, we've had to pre-record the interview with Mr. Bobby Perumal. It is my pleasure to introduce him to you, and hopefully you will enjoy the conversation that I've had with him this evening. Thank you. So, Mr. Perumal, I am now looking at these beautiful photographs that you are talking about, right? This is the house that you lived in. This is a photograph of you with your trophy. And here's another photograph with you with the principal receiving a trophy. And here's another one with you, the main trophy, obviously having done very well in school. And this is the bicycle that you were talking about, that the principal mentioned. And finally, we have this picture of you here in the school play where you play the role of Hari Chandra, was it? Right? So, Mr. Perumal, these photographs, tell me about your life as a young person, right, before the age of 20. But what I want to know, you being the eldest of 9 children, and you were about 7 or 8 when your mother started a business which she needed to start because she had to support the family. Can you tell me about this business? What was your role in the business? How did you help her? Who helped her? Where did she get the ingredients from? Please tell me the story of your mother's business, Mr. Perumal.
Thank you, Doc. I must confess, life would have been very, very difficult had it not been for the assistance of my mother. My father earned a very poor salary. Unfortunately, he couldn't live a comfortable life. But my mother was intelligent. She was not academically qualified, but she had the intelligence how to support and make the life of the family a happy one. She initiated a business. Firstly, she had made some confectionaries. She made quite a lot of different types of confectionaries, and the material, the ingredients were mostly bought by me. Although I was small, but she will give me a list of what she requires. I used to go to the shop. My popular shop was Vada's store in Verulam. I'll get my ingredients there, and even things from other places. Whatever she needed oil, she needed flour, jeera, and a lot of things that go into to make up the murku and the vada and the gulgula, the poli. So I used to be well trained in buying all those ingredients. I will bring and give it to my mother. My mother spent many hours preparing these confectionaries. She would start early morning and continue right till late in the night. And we had the kitchen, that's where she did her working preparations. We had no lights.
So, Mr. Perumal, this is a lovely photo of your parents. Please tell me, about your heritage, where you tell me about your grandparents, how they came to South Africa, why they came here, when they came here, and tell me their names, if you remember your parents' names, and eventually how you came to be born as the eldest child in the family.
Thank you, Doc. My grandfather came from India in a place called Trichinopoli, Trichinipoloi, Trichinopoli, India. On the 6th of March, they boarded the ship 1888. They came to South Africa because they had a very difficult life while they were in India. Their income was very low. They couldn't cope up with their living standards. They eventually learned that South Africa was a land of milk and honey. And when they did land here, they traveled straight through to Frasers. Their boss was in Frasers. They lived there, they worked hard, the sugar plantations, and gradually, later stage, he shifted to Tongaat. There he also had a farm, and later on, he had a restaurant. He worked in the restaurant, and he had 2 sons and 5 daughters. 2 of the sons. My father was the second son. My father worked very hard, and eventually he married my mother, Mrs. Munima Perumal, and both lived quite happily, but we did not live very long in Tonga. We came into Verulam. My father found a job, and his boss was Mr. Mestri. and he got into the laundry business. As I said, my name was Bobby Permal, and I was quite happy. I was the eldest of the siblings. I was well catered for. It was great joy for them when I was born because I was the eldest amongst the siblings in the Karapal family. That was the place where we stayed. We stayed in Chetty's building, Verulam. Eventually, I went to school in the year 1943 to the Sri Gopalal Temple School. I wasn't there very long, just for a year, and my parents relocated to Coniston, about 5 kilometers away from Verulam. There, we had a farm of about 2 acres land, small holdings. We worked on the farm. My parents.
So, Mr. Perumal, here I see you have got your motorbike license, right? And you got this in January 1960. This was exactly 100 years after our indentured great-grandparents came to this country. And then I also see that there's another letter here dated the 12th of August 1963. It is from the school principal, Mr. Simon David. And then finally here I can see a letter from the post office, and it is dated 3rd November 1976. So Mr. Perumal, please take us through these incidents in your life which obviously impacted you in some way or the other, that you made a decision to do these things. So share with us, Mr. Perumal.
Thank you very much, Doc. Firstly, this letter of appreciation. Whilst I was working in the restaurant, of course the restaurant had so many different sections. They had a book section, second-hand books, milk bar, groceries, and a number of other departments. Now, one of the books that I came across in the book section, I was perusing through them, and I found a book titled The Entire Works of Shakespeare. Now, I thought this would be highly educational for students. So I gave it to my younger brother, Leslie, and asked him to present it to the school. He took that to the school, handed it to the principal. The principal at that time was Mr. Simon David. In appreciation of my submitting the book to them, the principal wrote me a letter of appreciation. I appreciated that, and he told that he's asked his librarian to put it into the stock book of the Verulam Indian High School. That was done, and I was pleased that there is something to remember me. And at the same time, he did mention that if other parents did that, it will be highly appreciated, and the students will have enough books to peruse through.
Okay, now about your driver's license.
My driver's license, in my earlier days, I used to travel from Verulam to Durban by train, and gradually my uncle and auntie came home and visited us after a couple of years, and they said, look, it's not healthy for you to travel alone all this long journey from Verulam to Durban, in and out, come very early and leave very late in the night. And I stayed with them. I stayed with them for a while, and then my uncle got promoted to a job in Pietermaritzburg. Now I had no.
Mr. Perumal, as we round up our interview, I want to say thank you very much to Auntie for making this lovely tea for me and offering me biscuits. Do you have any final comments as we end our interview?
Yes, Doc. First and foremost, I want to thank you for taking the trouble of compiling my report, submitting my report to Trinidad. I also want to say thank you to you in a big way for the sacrifices that you made to travel from Durban to Verulam. And my wife, I must thank you very much for all the patience that she has and all the assistance that she renders to me. And may God bless you all, guide you all, and protect you all the way. Shalima and Dr. Mabir, we are deeply indebted to you all. You always have been very accommodating, very helpful, and that makes me feel comfortable. And may our relationship continue for a longer period.
Thank you, Mr. Perumal.
That was so thoughtful of you, Mr. Perumal. Thank you very much. You shared so much about your life, and we so appreciate it. And Dr. Kogi, we cannot thank you enough for all the support. You always go out of your way, and it helps us so much because we love to highlight all of you all in South Africa, but it's not always possible. It's not easy to do so. So we really thank you for facilitating. I'm seeing a comment in the chat, Mr. Perumal, by Dr. Betty Govindan. She says the area that you lived in was the north coast of Natal. Mr. Simon David is the father of Dr. Phyllis Naidu, who is a well-known political activist. I imagine you know all the parties named here. Mr. Perumal, can you unmute?
Sorry, please repeat. I'm a little bit hard of hearing.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll do that. Thank you very, very much for sharing all that you have. So I will repeat what Dr. Betty Govindan had stated in the chat. She says the area where you lived, it was in the north coast of Natal, and Mr. Simon David is the father of Dr. Phyllis Naidu, a well-known political activist. So I'm speculating that you know all of these parties.
Yes, I know Betty Govindan as well. She has attended our 1860 settlers. She was one of the speakers there. I know Phyllis Naidu as well. I know her sister Cindy, and I know her father, Mr. Simon David. He was my principal, a very firm but very thorough principal that we had. We were lucky to have a person of his caliber.
Okay,
Thank you.
very well.
Yes.
Dr. Albert Williams, you are always welcome to pose your questions. Please unmute and go ahead and do so.
No, I'm good. Welcome and thank you. It is so exciting to hear the story of one of our leaders. It just makes you realize that we have so much in common in terms of the struggles and tribulations to try to make life wherever our ancestors took us. But my question to you is, being an educator here in South Florida, how much was education a key variable in your life to where you are today? Can you expand on the role of education? Because I'm trying hard to help our people, and one way is, what are the variables that we can do to ensure that our Indian people are improving their lives?
Mr. Perumal, can you respond, please?
Question, I appreciate that. Look, in terms of education, the Indians are committed. As far as education is concerned, I believe that they have all the potential. The parents, the pioneers, hardly had any education.
Right.
But that was no barrier for the progress of the younger generation. We thank these indentured laborers because they put their heart to give their children the best of education. And thanks God, as a result of the children getting educated, even the pioneers themselves enjoyed the benefits of their labor, simply because amongst the Indians, it was not a matter of living in small families. They always believed in living in a joint family. They were a great assistance to each other. Even if one of the members of the family did not work, he or she were well protected by those that did work. So I think as far as education is concerned, it is a most important part of your life. And I'm glad that they have done that part. And as time goes on, I'm sure the standard of education will improve, or it is already improved. I think we can compliment the Indians for that. We have people of all caliber, doctors, philosophers, scientists, writers, you name it, we've got them in our country. But what we do hope is that although they've got the education, unfortunately, in the present situation in South Africa, they are not being employed as they should be. You know, they came out with this, what's called demographics and all this kind of thing, which is to a certain extent detrimental to us at the moment. But we hope as time goes on, things will change and we shall all benefit from the hard work and labor that has been put on by our seniors by our indentured laborers. So for that, we salute them and we respect them in every respect. And I also want to mention that in Verulam, there has been a monument built up to remember the first ship that brought the Indians into South Africa after about on the 16th of November, 1860. And well, that I'm not going to talk very much because we got people in our team who are high think tankers, I can call them, highly talented, and they have made a tremendous contribution in the progress of that monument. And I do hope that that monument is going to last for quite some time. I sincerely pray that it will not be damaged, like some of the monuments are being damaged here and there. But my sincere prayer is that the contribution made by our Indian indentured laborers must be remembered for many, many years. You and I might be gone, but posterity must remember the contribution made by them, and they must appreciate that. And if possible, follow the footings of the senior people. That's their only teacher, that's their only guidance, and we pray to God that this is going to be a lasting memory of everybody. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams and Mr. Perumal. We have another question from Ucha. Unfortunately, her bandwidth is low, so she posted the question in the chat and I'll ask it for her. She wants to know what it was like to be in South Africa at the time of apartheid.
Be very honest with you. During the time of apartheid, we lived here, but to me, I didn't experience hardship because to me, it was a way of life. That is what I took it. To me, I was not involved in politics. I was not reading papers. As I said to you earlier, our life was not so easy. Only when I left school, when I started work, then I started hearing about politics and names that I haven't even heard of up till the age of, say, around about plus minus 20. Mandela, to me, was unheard of. And although we worked hard, we were not allowed to go into the restaurants. We were not allowed to mingle with the whites. To me, it was a normal way of life. Only at a later stage, I realized what damage it has done to us, unfortunately. Everywhere you go to public service places, you find a knee blankies. To me, it was just accepted. It was just accepted. I thought that was the way of life. But now I realize what a curse it was to us. So that is one of these experiences. But all in all, we accepted that as a way of life. We were quite happy. But now it makes us think, no, man, it wasn't that easy. It wasn't that good. People who were reading the papers, kept up with politics, knew full well that we are going through a very bad stage in life. As I said earlier, we lived in the rural area. We hardly came into the cities. We hardly knew what apartheid was. But when I started to work, I know I should travel by bus. Those buses too, at one stage, they stopped taking non-whites and whites together. We have to sit on the buses on the top. You go into restaurants, you find that you've got to sit somewhere else. And even in the post office where I worked, we can't go and sit with the whites and eat there, or we can't enter into those areas. We couldn't even work together. They had a non-European section. Now, that was one glaring example for me to really think that what is apartheid. It just ruined our life, I think, for a number of people. And I do hope that things will change. We can't keep this all the time. Remember, we've got to progress. That's my main aim. And I'm more concerned about the younger generation. We elders might just pass on now. What's going to be the future of the children and the grandchildren? So I'm praying that it will all work out for them one day. God is wonderful. He's always going to grace us. And I pray that things will go out well and God be with us in all our days. Thank you.
I agree. Yeah. So Ucha says, thank you very much for that response. And I think one of the things that you said there was so important, your attitude to the whole apartheid experience. I feel that perhaps our indentured ancestors might have had that very same attitude to their situations, having lived under difficult times and so on. They just did what was required of them at the point in time without reflecting too much about the actual episode in their lives. So it may have been a very positive way to live under those kind of challenging times. You have a number of comments in the chat to read, Mr. Perumal, quite complimentary ones from members of the audience. So I want to say thank you very much for sharing all the insights that you have and for being here with us at this very late hour. We so appreciate it.
God bless you and thank you for listening to my story. And I hope the community at large will benefit from it. We are just reading some of the hardships, but there are much, much more in the short space of time. We cannot relay everything to you, but nevertheless, I hope the message has been through. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Bobby Perumal. And at this point in time, I want to bring on our second speaker, and that is Mr. Vidur Dindial. Shakira, can I ask you to please introduce Mr. Dindial for me?
All right, sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Dindial, Vidur Chandra Dindial, is a Guyanese-born Englishman who is 88 years old. He was born in 1935, and at age 27, he migrated to London, where he has been a resident for 61 years. He studied both in Guyana and at Delhi University in India. He's an architect and author, a London JPN magistrate, and member of the Social Security Appeal Tribunals, among other preoccupations. So welcome, sir. We will chat for about 15 minutes and then take the questions from the audience.
We'll have to have him unmuted, please. Excellent.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. To everybody, Sitaram, Assalamu alaikum, Namaste. Thank you very much. I am 88 years old and at this sannyas stage of my life. I see my job as mainly to prepare myself to meet my maker. I want no other job. If you ask me to share what I know, I will do so. I learned this from my revered father, who retired to Sai Baba Ashram, where he blissfully passed away. I feel happy about my life as an Indian and as a Guyanese. As an Indian, I feel my life has been enriched by my upbringing at home with so many role models in every walk of life. Enriched as a Guyanese with the uniqueness of living side by side and absorbing cultural values of other races, European, African, Chinese, and Amerindian, a microcosm of the world. My Indianness is my strength in the multi-ethnic cultural world we live in. On how to live with other people, my culture provides me with answers for every situation, simply because it is natural and universal. You don't need to go to school to learn these. Happily, in today's world, we embrace universality, the values of equality, ethnically, socially, and religiously. To each his or her own. No one is higher or lower. When we celebrate Indian Arrivals Day, I often see photos of our ancestors ill-clad as if they were slaves themselves. This presented an image of a people of low class, an image our erstwhile colonial masters like to see. It suited their status as the masters and the indentured laborers as their virtual slaves. The images do a disservice to our ancestors. The same goes for the C word to describe us, which colonialists were happy for us to use. This word again has associations with low class, illiterate people. It is like the N word used to describe people of African origin. Celebrating Indian Arrivals Day is wonderful, but do we need to perpetuate the unsavory of the old colonial days? We all know about the evils of colonialism and its existence when class and caste divisions reigned supreme. I lived through it in my early years. On a recent trip to India, two things about the Indians struck me. One, they seemed content with their lot, and two, they were hardworking. I saw a parallel with our ancestors. They came to Guyana to work in slave-like conditions. They ignored the conditions and focused on their work to look after themselves and their families. That accounts for the success eventually, which made them, as you know, the economic engine of Guyana and similar countries. I'm proud of that. The achievements of many families in Guyana are proof of their culture to focus on bettering their lives and things, and these I like to celebrate. Our time here as human beings is limited. We don't have 150 years to live. We all know how long we have to live. And in the time, we can make the world a better place in time we have, with strengthening and furthering every move towards a world where equality prevails, where we are more caring, more human, where our children grow up to live more happily and enjoy the wonders of life and nature. We are living in a different age. Our ancestors indeed came with little or nothing. They were poor, most with little or no education. That is nothing to be ashamed of. But that was not all that they came with. They came with a culture embedded in their thinking and in their way of life, intensely human, highly civilized, the way they lived and how they related with others. A culture, Indian culture, embedded in their DNA, an ancient culture going back thousands of years. Our ancestors made spectacular progress. Two factors stand out: opportunities and the absence of caste restrictions. So social and economic mobility was a blessing for them compared to what they had before. The culture of our ancestors has enriched my life. Randomly, these facets I celebrate. Going through them one by one, respect. Our ancestors strive to live in harmony with those around them, to respect others, to cultivate friendships with people, not to live aloof. We address everyone as uncle or auntie, dada or didi, not by their first name. I and my brother were brought up to touch the feet of our parents and say namaste in the morning when we got up from bed and in the evening before we went to bed. In return, they would kiss our forehead and bless us. Community living, we lived as one large family, the whole community, supporting one another, sharing good and bad. This inclusive community shields everyone from harm. It looks after those who do wrong. It comes together at regular religious functions to give thanks to God for blessings at work or at birth, at a wedding or support at a death. Friends would freely help with building a big tent and cooking loads of food for guests at a family wedding or other occasion. The local priest or senior of the community was there to give advice or support. Once or twice a year, there would be a jug, a ceremonial reading from the holy books. That would be a festival lasting up to 7 days Many of the country singers would contribute with devotional songs. There would be daily feasting. The food would be simple, traditional. Dal, rice, aloo curry, mohan bhog, and served on purain leaves. The community was self-containing and self-supporting. Worship is another facet of the community. Our ancestors built places of worship, temples, mosques, or churches. In my early years, I went with my parents to one church where Christian hymns were sung in Hindi, and the hymn book was written in Hindi words. In my birthplace, the sugar plantation, the white manager helped with resources to build the temple. Worship was important to their life. The cow, Gau Mata, was a special member of the family. My mother named her cow Gauri. The cow is revered as an asset for the young family. It helps to plow the field. The milk is there for the young child and family. The cow is good for transport with a cart. Value of land. Most important was their respect for land. Prithvi Mata in 1919, Mr. J.A. Lakhu wrote, to the East Indian, the earth is the bountiful mother. As soon as his term of indenture has expired, he turns with glad heart to Mother Earth. He was not exaggerating. To landless landlords owning a piece of land, laborers owning a piece of land was magic, a gift from the gods. Sadly, we in Guyana, in my early days in our schools, we were not brought up, we were not taught anything positive about Indians. Even today, there's indifference to Indianness due to the deep-rooted denigration of much about us, our names, our food, eating with our fingers, our customs, our dress, our music, etc. I feel blessed that I was brought up to look up to things Indian, not because of feeling superior, but I am second to none. Diaspora culture, irrespective of faith, was a survival kit of values to deal with any experience, good or bad, from birth to death. Although the culture is identified with India, it is truly universal. The cultural values of the entire human race, values learned over millennia of experience, the Indians have. These values are not set in stone. They are dynamic. They adapt over time and circumstances. But at the core, they are basic human values. And these include saving, save for a rainy day, waste not, want not. Sacrifice, parents would sacrifice anything for their children. Suffering, pain and pleasure go together. Dono barabar hai. Contentment, happy with salt and rice. My parents used to say, sleep on the floor, minimum to live on. They were content. Living within one's means, do not spend more than we earn. Society, being part of the society. Duty to support it and it supports you. Hard work. The fruit of labor is very sweet. Mehnat ka phal meetha hota hai. Giving back. Eaten the salt of the earth, be grateful, must put something back into it. Duty. Duty is superior to feelings. Duty to family and society. In Bharat Milap, one phrase which rings in my head for many, many years is, Bhavna se kartabya ucha hai. That is, feelings are less than your duty. Duty is superior to feelings. Joint family, everyone in family supporting each other at work, at play, in grief. Modesty, aversion to show. Simple living, high thinking, live and let live. gratitude. Do not bite the hand that feeds. Respect it. Respect the boss. I am inspired by the achievements of our ancestors. They battled with obstacles which we do not face today and came out successful in many walks of life. These I celebrate. These would inspire our youth. About the future, our world now is a kaleidoscope of ethnicities, faiths, and cultures. We are at the cusp of a sea change in what people the world over value in life. We have needs which are met by human values in our culture. Our immigrant ancestors learned in their travel across the world to shed the heavy baggage of division and intolerance and embrace the new world secure in their cultural values, their modus vivendi. This is their legacy to us. We are at the cutting edge of social change, open, barrier-free, not fearful of better understanding and fellowship across ethnicities, faiths, and cultures, for which dhanyabad and thank you.
Thank you so much. That was quite a philosophical presentation, tinged or contextualized with personal anecdotes. Really appreciate all that you've shared. And I'm seeing so many, or rather at the moment, compliments to you in the chat, which I will encourage you to read. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, you all are free to ask Mr. Dindyal any questions that you would like to. Just indicate by clicking on the reactions button, show me a raised hand, and I can call upon you. Mr. Dindyal, let me ask you something that's been on my mind. When you are now in London, what do younger people call you? Are you referred to as Dada? Are you referred to as Uncle, Chacha? What?
Well, Chacha is more common than anything else. My niece refers to me. But otherwise, people call me Vidur. I like to be called Vidur because when you call me Mr. Dindyal, only my father used to be called Mr. Dindyal.
Well, you understand we have a little situation here because I don't think I would never refer to someone around the age of my father by his first name or
I understand that,
if
and
we
that's
know
how
each
we
other
were
very,
brought up.
very well.
I understand that.
Yeah. And so
Similarly.
I reflected, you said your mother named her cow Gauri. Well, my father, who's looking at the program right now with Shakira, my father named his cow Mary. So
Oh.
yes. So we had Marys in Trinidad, you had Gauris in Guyana. Any questions for Mr. Dindyal?
It looks like as if I've stumped everybody.
I think so.
Hello,
Dr. Williams, go ahead, please. Unmute.
Sorry?
Dr. Williams, please unmute.
Got it. Hello. That presentation was amazing. There's no other way to describe it. And I applaud you, sir. I cannot call you by your first name either. I'm not from that era. So please forgive me. I've been to Guyana many times in my prior career, and I've met many people like you, but you said something that I like, and then I'll just leave you to comment on it. We have more than the color of our skins as Indian. It's 2,000-3,000 years of culture that we carry with us. And I think we should never forget that component because we always talk about all the things. And because I'm an economist and finance professor, you gave me all the lessons of money management in your presentation. So thank you.
Indeed, yes. I scoured this very much. And I worked out because my parents started off poor and they built they were working in the sugar plantation, of course. My mother was cutting grass to make 2 ends meet and selling milk, etc., etc. But we had a shop and it developed and it grew. But so many people have done that. And because I tell you what, you don't have to go to school to know these things. And I searched in my brain so many times, and I found that those things I mentioned about our culture, those facets, I didn't make it up myself. I found them I didn't articulate them myself. I found them in basic books, etc., etc. But they're such basic human values. No matter what you do, wherever you go, do you know the crisis that the Western countries have now is they've moved away from basic humanity, values humanity. They think the machine and industrialization and all of that will solve their problems. But we're moving in London, I'm so aware of it. We're moving rapidly towards non-humanity, non-human relations. And that is a serious problem. Thankfully, as an Indian, we've got that, but even India is following the West.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Exactly. And therein lies the problem for us.
Mhm.
Because we are
For me,
trying
I'm
to
on my
hold
way
on.
out, so I wouldn't have the problem. For me, thankfully, Bhagwan is there and I'm going. All I want him is to prepare a little, let me wait in the waiting room when I get up there. So I have no problem. But I'm saying that when you think about it logically, and you think about it, when you pick up the phone nowadays,
Mhm.
they tell you on the phone, the automatic thing tells you go to online. I want to speak to a human being. And that is becoming less and less. We have a group of old people, and they have occasions where they meet. And many of these occasions, and I've mentioned it to them, are occasions where they do not encourage meeting for meeting's sake. They have exercises, they have reading books. But am I meeting Shakira, or am I meeting Utsha, or am I meeting Dr. Albert Williams? Are we exchanging views and feelings? No. Right across the board, I see that in the West. And I see it all over, because we are moving, unfortunately, that way. Sorry, I get off my stool now.
No, that's why you are here. That's why
Thank
we encourage people like you to come onto our platform and to speak, to remind us of what's important. So thank you so very much for that.
Thank you very much.
At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, because we all share a love for Indian music, we want to pause for a melodious evergreen gem, which I'm sure Mr. Dindyal will enjoy, as will the rest of us. So this is from the 1950 movie entitled Babul, starring Muhammad Yusuf Khan, who we more commonly know as Dilip Kumar, as well as Nargis. So this song is entitled Milate Hi Aakhe Dil Hua.
Milate aakhe dil.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you so much.
Robin, bring it up. Otherwise, we have Mr. Dindyal who will sing it.
No, I don't know the words. But I will sing.
Go right ahead.
मिलते ही आंखें दिल हुआ दीवाना किसी का
मिलते ही आंखें दिल हुआ दीवाना किसी का
अफसाना मेरा बन गया अफसाना किसी का
अफसाना मेरा बन गया अफसाना किसी का
पूछो न ना मोहब्बत का असर, हाय ना पूछो, हाय ना पूछो।
पूछो ना मोहब्बत का असर, हाय ना पूछो, हाय ना पूछो।
दम भर में कोई हो गया परवाना किसी का,
दम भर में कोई हो गया परवाना किसी का। अफसाना मेरा बन गया अफसाना किसी का, मिलते ही आंखें दिल हुआ दीवाना किसी का।
हंसते ही न आ जाए कहीं आंखों में आंसू, आंखों में आंसू।
हंसते ही ना आ जाए कहीं आंखों में आंसू, आंखों में आंसू।
भरते ही छलक जाए ना पैमाना किसी का,
भरते ही छलक जाए ना पैमाना किसी का। अफसाना मेरा बन गया अफसाना किसी का, मिलते ही आंखें दिल हुआ दीवाना किसी का।
Beautiful voices there. So, ladies and gentlemen, that song was rendered by Shamshad Begum and Talat Mahmood. We must give credit. It was written by Shakil Badiuni and the music was composed by Naushad Ali. I hope you all enjoyed it. So, thank you so much, Mr. Dindial, and thanks, Ravan.
Thank you very much.
We now bring on our third speaker, and this is Dr. Arnold Thomas of St. Vincent. He's 81 years old. He was born in 1942. He's a former professor of political science and a diplomat of the OECS Embassy in Brussels. He's the Vincentian representative of Indian Diaspora Council and other organizations, and there's so much more to him that we don't even have time to read the entire bio. So I will allow him to share his story with you and his very, very interesting presentation about St. Vincent. So can we please have Dr. Thomas? Ravin, can you please bring up his presentation? So Dr. Thomas, go ahead if you want to just start talking through it. I know you know your stuff.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Greetings from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Actually, today is also a memorable day for us in St. Vincent. It's a celebration of Indian Arrival Day. Indian Arrival Day officially is the 1st of June, but it was meant because of some other activities that they wanted to put on. The usual thing was brought forward or put back until today. So this morning around 8 o'clock, there was actually a renewal, if you like, of the arrival of Indians, first Indians in 1861. Now, I'd like to begin my presentation with two stories. One is a boat story and the other is an airplane story. So let me start with the boat story. It goes like this. On the 5th of November, 1865, the ship Countess of Ripon left Calcutta with a number of Indians bound for estates in St. Vincent and Grenada. On board the ship was a pregnant lady The family consists of the father, pregnant lady, and 2 sisters and a brother. On the 4th of January, 1866, the pregnant lady gave birth to a boy child. And things were going very well as they sailed up the South Atlantic, heading for the Caribbean area. They were supposed to pass Barbados, just south of Barbados, before heading off to St. Vincent. Then on the morning of the 20th of January, the ship ran into reeds very, very, very heavily in the south of Barbados, and it was stuck. And thanks to the help of Barbadians who were working on an estate close by and the estate owners, all day on the 21st, everyone was brought from the ship alive. But the story there I want to highlight is that lady who gave birth to the little boy. When the baby was brought ashore, there was this black lady by the name of Sarah Maynard, who took the child and gave the child an ample supply of milk from her own breasts. And that, according to the story written by the magistrate in Barbados, saved the poor Indian's life. Now, I want to say this. Were it not for that humanitarian deed done by Sarah Maynard, I would not be here to tell you that story, because that person on that ship was born on the ship was none other than my grandpa, Gangaram. So what you're going to hear from now on is a lot of story about Gangaram and what he had to tell us about the Indians in St. Vincent. My second story is about let's call it just a plane trip. I went to England in December 1991 for a New Year's party, actually. And while I was at this party, a Trinidadian guy confronted me and said, "Oh, you Indians in St. Vincent, you jumped the ship. That's why you all don't know anything about India and Indians. You have no heritage, etc., etc." And it was true. I knew very, very little other than some stories that I heard from my old people. I didn't know where we came from, when we came, and all of that. So next day, on a Monday, I headed down to the public record office. And believe me, I was absolutely shocked when I saw the amount of records about the Indians in St. Vincent. And to cut a long story short, that was a life changer, because rather than going back to America to be a political scientist, I became a historian looking at the history of Indians in St. Vincent. So for the next almost 10 years, I buried myself in the archives in England and learned all about the Indians in St. Vincent. Okay, so that's a little background. Now, the Indians, in all, there were about 8 ships that brought Indians to St. Vincent from 1861 to 1890. And Gangaram, of course, my grandfather came on the one in 1866. And things are going well for the Indians, and most of them ended up in an estate called Argyle. And Argyle was close to, there was a river that flowed through it, and they were supposed to be very healthy. However, like everything else, when the price of sugar fell, things changed in St. Vincent. And the years 1880, that was the year after the last ship to St. Vincent, 1880 to 1885 were very, very, very bad. And things were so bad in 1881, 82, that Indians on this estate called Argyle brought their grievances, thought they would march to Kingstown to bring their grievances to the Governor General at the time. So about 50 Indians barefooted down Cutlass and Hoe and marched from Argyle Estate to Kingstown to protest the treatment they were receiving, because a lot of them had worked more than their indenture period. A lot of them were not paid what the legal salary should have been. And a lot of them who were entitled to a free passage back to India were not given that passage. So they marched to Kingstown, and 7 of their ringleaders were arrested, and they were arrested on the charge of vagabondism. And vagabondism means that they traveled for more than the regular what was supposed to be the distance they're supposed to not to travel from the estate. Anyway, the 7 were arrested, they were jailed, and that was the beginning of a long story. To cut the story short again, that march in Kingston on the 7th October 1882 marked the beginning of the end of indentureship in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Notice I'm saying St. Vincent, and we're also saying St. Vincent and the Grenadines, because these days we don't want to say St. Vincent only, we say St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So indentureship, that was a first for us in indentureship in the Caribbean. The indentured Indians, and let me go back to my grandpa, Gangaram. The story I picked up from the records was that there was a march in Kingston. And then I recalled what my grandparents said, what Grandpa had said. He said they marched to Kingston to get back the promise. What was the promise? The promise was, after they had worked for so many years as indentured labor on the estates, they were entitled to a free passage back to India. And some of them were there for 15 years laboring, and they were not given the passage back to India. So that was the beginning of the end of indentureship to St. Vincent. So that was 1882. By 1885, a lot of Indians went back to India. And why they were set back free, of course, and it was only after the intervention of the colonial office, because they found that Indians were being cheated out of their free passage and they were not given the kind of treatment that they really should have had. So the last ship came on in 1880, and interestingly, a lot of all the ships who came, all the Indians who came on that ship in 1880 re-indentured until 1890, because things had got a little bit better for the plant, for the workers on the estate. And so by 1890, that was really the full end of indentureship in St. Vincent. So let me get back to my grandpa's story. Grandpa remained on Argyle Estate for a number of years, and the estate changed several hands. There were two distinct events that impacted on this, not just the estates, but on Indians. One of them was a hurricane of 1898 that messed up all the houses, including all the ranges of the Indians in Argyle. And the second was the eruption of the volcano, the Soufrière volcano in 1902. And as many as 500 Indians that lived around the volcano area died in that eruption. And the story is that a lot of those who survived came down to Argyle Estate to get away from the volcano, and there they lived. So the estate changed hands a couple of times until the my parents were actually born on Argyle Estate. One in my father in 1907, and my mother around about 1910. Anyway, as the estates changed hands, things were getting very, very bad. And in the 1920s, it was about to change hands, which would change things a lot for the whole of St. Vincent. So the estate owner by the name of Mr. Smith told some 200 Indians who were living in Argyle that the new owner might not be so benevolent, and he encouraged them to sell whatever property they have, whether goats or cattle or whatever, and buy some land. So the Indians, some 200 Indians at the time living in Argyle Estate, they got together and they bought a lot of land outside of Argyle Estate. They bought in two areas called Acres and another one called Calder. Incidentally, I'm from Calder. They also bought lands in a place called Richland Park, and you hear a lot about Richland Park Indians. So Calder, Acres, Richland Park, and some other places became the home of Indians. And every time you hear about Calder, Acres, and Richland Park, people always talk about Argyle, because Argyle, as we say, became not just a place where they lived, but it was a state of mind, and they were talking about the Argyle Indians. So the Argyle Indians moved away and settled in these new villages, and these were new villages formed. In the meantime, lots of things had happened because the Indians who came and lived in Argyle, a lot of them, because of the internal situation, they had to change the religion. The children didn't have a school to go to, as some other countries where there were Indian schools. And more than that, the Indian parents were very reluctant to send their children to school where they were mainly blacks. So they stayed away from the school. Actually, in 1883, one of the owners at Argyle Estate established a school for Indians. But because of the rush to get back to India during that period, 83, 1 year later, the school closed. And that was the end of Indian school for the Indians in St. Vincent. However, the Indians moved out from Argyle and they formed these villages, which became mainly Indian villages. In the meantime, the Indians had changed in terms of the heritage and the culture. Except for weddings, Indians had forgotten all. By the early 1920s, a lot of Indians who were born in St. Vincent had forgotten all about Bhojpuri. They had forgotten about Indian dress. They had forgotten about Indian food. They turned to Creole food. They turned to what is then known as, the normal dresses, shirts and pants and things of that nature. So the Indians, Corder Acres and Richmond Park survived as Indian villages. And so today we have in St. Vincent not a single Indian family I can think of that carries an Indian name. We have names like Bacchus and Bullock, Dean, Matisse, Mackenzie, Woods, Lewis, and all of that. They're all Anglo-Saxon names, and those are names that were given to them after they got parents, because most of them were converted to Christianity. Again, I should say that there was a massive effort by the churches, the Wesleyans or Methodists, plus the Catholics and the Anglicans to convert the Indians and convince them that Hinduism was a form of idolatry. So most of the Indians, by the time we get to the middle of the 20th century, had turned to Christianity, and not only that, but all kinds of new other religions were coming in. And we today have in our village no less than half a dozen churches, or not a single Indian temple or whatever. So that was the end of our Indian indenture. All of that changed. It took many years, and things began to change. Going back to my own personal story, when I started researching the Indians, I was invited, and I must say, if he's on there, the first person to recognize my research in England was Dr. Vincent Samaru, and he invited me down in 1995 to this big meeting in Trinidad. And I think that was the meeting in 1995 that a lot of people got to hear about Indians in St. Vincent for the first time. So from then on, I've been talking about Indians all over the place. And then jumping ahead, in the going up to the post-Windrush generation, by the 1960s, there was a rush for people to get out of the island and to get to England. And because of that, those villages I mentioned, Calder, Acres, and Richmond Park, there's a massive depopulation of the Indians. A lot of Indians left St. Vincent, went to England. And so today, there's one place in England called High Wycombe. It's called Little St. Vincent. And if you see a lot of Indians walking down the street in High Wycombe, don't think they're Indians or Pakistanis. They're Indians from St. Vincent. So High Wycombe has become Little St. Vincent and Little Indian St. Vincent. And so a lot of them, we have been back to them, finding out, getting stories of the Indians in St. Vincent, how we lived, particularly in the post-1940 area time when the war ended, and a lot of them migrated to England. A lot of them went off to places like Curacao and Aruba and to the Panama Canal. And so the Indian population really shrank a lot in St. Vincent. Now, jumping ahead, St. Vincent, thanks to the history that we have been digging up, we managed to establish an Indian Heritage Foundation back in 2006. And since then, we're on the move again to rediscover and reclaim our Indian past. So like today, Indian Arrival Day, we do everything. We dress up in Indian gear, and we eat a lot of Indian food and do a lot of things Indian. We have friends from Trinidad who come to our country during Indian Arrival Day and do performances for us. So that in a nutshell, my friend, is a lot that has happened to our Indian population over the years in St. Vincent. We were among the first to have Indians, and we were the first also to get rid of Indian indentureship. So here we are today with a lot of English names, and thanks to our foreparents, a lot of us have survived and come a long way since their toil on Argyle. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. I realize that time has passed and you didn't mention the video, but with all the information that you shared, we didn't really need the video. You know the story by heart. So thank you so much. If anyone has questions now for Dr. Thomas, please, we welcome them.
Oh, just let me apologize, because I really wanted to show that bit with my Uncle Reynold, who was also born on Argyle Estate, and he also shared a lot of memories of growing up in Argyle before they moved away from that place in the 1930s.
Yeah. So
and he died at a good old age of 97, and the other one in that video his name was Malcolm, another relative, who died at the age of 100.
Okay, so here's what, Ravan, can we bring back that video and just bring about 5 minutes of it or so, please? Can we share that video? Thanks.
As school is concerned, the two schools we had to attend to was Mesopotamia, the Morocco Government School, and the Stubbs Government School. The lower Calder children went to Stubbs, and the upper Calder went to Mesopotamia. Well, we had to climb a steep hill, and later Davis Hill, we call it. And we had to walk barefoot in those days because we didn't have a shoe. And the pitch, the pitch was cobblestone. So when I just covered the road with 1 inch stone, I had to walk and had barefoot, it was to paint the field. However, we tolerated and we went through school and got out school in there. In those days, we children in general were affected with a lame, we call it sore foot. Sores on the feet and so on. You know? They arrive from Chiga, Yaz, Tobo. I remember my father who had a donkey cat. He had a big box that tied on that cat. They took our route, the raw rain from the field to the factory. Around that season, most of the time, he would put the box on the cat, and between 6 to 8 of us as children, ages 6 to 10, will sit and bag and in a cat and come to see us to get our injection.
Like Argyle, Calder was even drier in the early months of the year, and the scarcity of water often made the villagers travel as far as Mesopotamia for drinking water. Later on, a small spring was discovered below a narrow incline, and that became the main source of water in those days.
Only source of water we had supplied in those days was on the Argyle Estate, and that is away down about almost a mile from acres to the place down the hole along there, and they call it reservoir. The estate owner had built a wall around it. It's a very nice spring, and it's still there. The spring is there. So you have to walk from acres of a Calder down to the reservoir to get water. And it was not a road, it was a track. So I had a big bowl I had to climb over and so on to get water. And that was the only source of water to get water. Well, you have to take it. A little later on, in the when all is down Soda, where we're staying here now, and just in the whole middle down there, behind the back down there, then they discovered another spring, which is called Maho. The water gushed out from the rock, but there was no tanker in those days, so the people would cut a banana body, like a, you know, when you split the body, you get like a spout. So they put it under the rock, and then they catch it, put a bucket and catch the water.
So you used to go with your little cutter.
Oh yeah, oh yes, yes. You know,
Well, you have a bucket.
Everybody, you know.
You have a bucket, a big bucket.
Go along the gully there, put the bucket on your head, and some.
No cutter?
Cutter, some. Yeah.
You take a placard and make a cut on your head.
I can, as a big strong boy, I can't tell you the number of times I fell down, coming up with the bucket on my head. I have to go right back in, go back again and get some water. So that was life in the village at the time. Over there were two springs over there. One was Jack Gutter, and beyond that was the other place we used to call the waterfall. And those are the two places we used to. That's where we had our public showers and public baths, right inside there.
By the turn of the century, Creolization had crept in. With it came Christianity. Most of the first set of East Indians were encouraged by the established churches to be christened, to have their children christened, and to accept English names. While the churches had their agenda of conversion, the Indians had already discovered that having Christian names allowed them to conduct business with ease.
The Indian name was changed. They still have it. They use it at home and so on. But where they had to do business, they used the English name. They took, as I said, for the Godfather title. So some Bacchus, some Thomas, and Bullock. Well, Ramballock, that's the original name. See, there's Ramballock, but they still put it short, Bullock. The Sutherland, well, they retained the Sutherland. There was Sadhu.
Like Gokul, who was his grandfather, and my great-grandfather, incidentally. Then you mentioned Rampal. Rampal came in 1880. The last of the Indians to arrive would settle in Argyle. Then Ramballock came in 1867, right? And he was a patriarch of the Bullocks and the Bacchuses. Like Gokul was the patriarch for all the Thomases, only Thomases. Then there was another one by the name of Aku. He came in 1866 also, and he was the patriarch of Sutherland, Fales, Moore, and who else in that clan? Those are somebody. And what happened? The children were given English names, okay, and they were given English names, maybe not so much out of choice, but because they had a little choice, as it were, because at the time the churches were very active to convert the Hindus.
Right, so there we have that very interesting tidbit that captures Dr. Thomas's life and that of his family. I'm noticing interesting conversation in the chat, Dr. Thomas, and you could probably check that out as well. We have so many comments from generally the people from Belize, and I'm seeing Dwayne, your request for a Bhojpuri speaker and singer is a very good one. Actually, it's something that we have been working on. We do have someone earmarked, but we didn't think to bring her to Belize. We thought to bring her on the program. I'm not too sure that she would leave India and be wanting to come down to Belize, and we will have to work it out and see what can happen with that. But I'm glad that you raised the point because it really is so important. And Dr. Thomas, at this point in time, can you say whether there are any words or terms or references or names of businesses or names of clothing, names of food, and so on, which reflect the Bhojpuri language or Hindi or Urdu and so on in St. Vincent?
Well, I don't know about the word itself, but I tell you, we still have a lot of curry dishes. We curry goat in St. Vincent has become it's one of the best. You know, if you go anywhere and anybody's serving curry goat, they want curry goat all the time. So that has the Indian connection. Um,
And how do you have curry goat with dal and rice, or you have it
with dal
with
and rice
roti?
also, yes, yes, that is something that was never forgotten. We love to cook the dal and rice, you know. There's a little story about Kalulu, because one of the stories I picked up was that the blacks, when the Indians started eating Kalulu, they said these people are animals, they're eating grass.
Yeah.
Dr. Williams could relate.
Only to discover, yes, we love Kalulu. So coming back to your question, yes, we still do have a lot of Indian dishes, and thanks to the connection with places like Trinidad, with the roti is still there. We do a lot of, we have restaurants around the place that do a lot of rotis, all kinds of rotis, you know, from beef,
Terrific.
sorry about that, from beef to chicken to shrimp.
Wonderful. So thank you very much for sharing. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me too.
Great. So ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, let's move on to Mr. Jay Nair, who is our fourth and final speaker. He is actually Jairam Nair, South African-born Canadian, who is 78 years old. He was born in 1944. He's a former teacher and activist in the anti-apartheid struggle. During the Soweto riots, he migrated to Canada, where he worked as a union representative. Welcome, Jay. I know you've been waiting for quite some time, and thank you so much for your patience.
I guess it was by seniority.
Yes.
Okay. My screen, I'm going to do the screen more. Okay, the next one. Next clip. As I said, this is a land acknowledgement that I always do in my sessions. As a second generation indentured Indian from South Africa, I am on the lands of the Mississauga, which is part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy of the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot nations. I recognize these peoples and their ancestors as peoples who inhabited these lands since time immemorial. In light of the horrific discoveries made at the sites of formal residential schools and the complicated history of Canada's relationship with Indigenous peoples, I remain more committed than ever to strengthen my relationship and ours with the Indigenous neighbors through action. I commit to read the Government of Canada's TRC report, which is the Truth and Reconciliation Report, and the 94 calls to action. I am therefore privileged to be living in the city of Mississauga, which is home to many global Indigenous peoples. I thank them for allowing me to be part of this city in Canada. Miigwech. Next slide. Namaste. Vanakkam. Assalamu alaikum. Miigwech. Sawubona. Now, these are some of the languages that I used: Tamil, Zulu, Islam, and Hindi. Now, looking at this map is just to give you a picture of where we originated and where we came from. And it's my father who came from there, and my grandfather, maternal side. Next. That is our country, South Africa, which is my former country. Now I'm in Canada. Now this is, before that, this is the section that we are talking about where the Indians from South Africa, from India, North, South, and the Maharashtra state came to work along this coast. And if you look at the pointer, it starts from the north, going right down to the south, and Durban is here, and Pietermaritzburg. I'll tell you why I'm pointing these out. Remember this when the time I get to the next slide. Next slide. Now, this is just giving you the transportation of Indian indentured labor by colony around the world. Now, this highlighted section is Natal and we had a total of 152,184 indentured Indians, indentured laborers come to South Africa and settled in the province of Natal. Next slide. Now, this is fine print. You can find it on Google. What we call indenture agreement of every indentured worker that came through the British colonial system. They have 13 conditions, and one word that came out loud and clear is they were chattels of the due, what we call employers that brought them from India. And those indentured laborers were picked and what we call coerced by agents for the British companies. And if you know of Tate and Lyle, that's one of them. You know the Hewletts, the sugar companies of South Africa, the Armstrongs, and what we call the Ilovo Golden Stirrup people, the Ilovo Mills. Next slide. And this is how they came as cattle in the ships coming to South Africa. And you'll find that this might have been the SS Truro, which was the first ship that landed on the shores of Natal at that time at the port called Port Natal around 1860. Next slide. And this is where this was the main occupation, planting and harvesting sugarcane for the sugar barons of England that owned estates in Natal. Next slide. Now here you see this was sometime in 1911 where they were in the market. And how did this happen? While these indentured laborers were during the day working on the farms, the women used to plant vegetables and all the stuff that's needed for their meals. And most of them were not meat eaters, but vegetarians. So they had to plant something. And that is a story that we heard. The Kalalu, the people in St. Vincent thought it was Indians eating grass. But here, the indentured Indians actually planted vegetables and they brought seeds with them from India. Next slide. This is fast forwarding the Indian businesswoman carrying a basket on the head. And this is the city of Durban. And here you'll see the Africans. And there you'll see the hat that's worn English style. And the people around there, this is the Indian market that is in Durban, and it used to be in the what we call the Casbah area today. And they had stalls in the market. Next slide. Now, why I brought this into the picture, this is where Mahatma Gandhi got his first taste of satyagraha in South Africa. So why I brought him into the picture is his journey in South Africa was with the Indian community and the fighting for the Indians' rights under the British government. And he learned how to fight passively. So that filters into my background and the life that my family went through. So that is the reason I brought. Some people might not want to know anything about Mahatma Gandhi, but he is part and parcel of my family and the Indian community in South Africa. And he did what he did right up to the time that he went away back to India to fight for the independence. Next slide. Here you see me at a conference in 1957, sometime at that time, and there's my face at the background. And this is Dr. Monty Naika, who was the president of the Indian Congress, the Congress that was set up by Mahatma Gandhi in 1894. So this was the Africans and Indians together at an Indian Congress conference in Durban. And that is where my political background, political learning started from the Congress office. Next slide. That's another Indian market scene. And I grew up in the market also. And this is the type of stalls early on. And later, the authorities, the local city council, built concrete blocks. And my mom had 2 concrete blocks as stalls. And that is where I used to spend my holidays and grew up helping in the selling of fruit and vegetables. Next slide. Now, this is just showing a complex of Indian businesses in the main city of Durban, 2 of them. But next slide also. And it's a complex of Indian businesses, and it's on what we call Grey Street at that time, which has now changed to Dr. Yusuf Dadu Street. Next slide. Now there's my maternal grandparents, and this is thanks to the 1860 Heritage Center with Selvan Naidu, who gave me the picture of my grandfather, and I finally found him. And I put them together because he left South Africa in 1927 and left my grandmother with the girls and 1 son to rear them. And there was animosity between them, but I'm bringing them together at this forum so that now they are in the museum for eternity. And she passed away at the age of about 99. And I don't know if you can calculate, in 1938, that was his age when he died in India. Next slide. Now, this is where I come with living monuments that my grandfather was involved in, built as architect. And this was a research done by some other persons, and they were part of a what we call art group. And it was a white group that did that. And they were what we call artifacts.co.za. And they were the ones that put this together. And now I'm showing all the temples that my grandfather was involved in, which is living to this day as monuments from the Indian indentured period. Now, why did they have to build these temples? The temples were the meeting places of the Hindus, that's the South Indians, North Indians, and the central part of India. And that was one of the magnets that put them together as a community. And once these buildings were built, then you had what we call passenger Indians, which came in and started building businesses to run so that they can cater to the Indian communities. And you find that the temples, as I said, was magnets, and they also were used as places of where they had weddings, and they had to build halls. And then the business community from the Indian communities donated money to build these temples and halls for use by the Indian community. Next slide. That's a typical wedding group. That's my sister's wedding in the 50s, mid 50s. And there's my youngest brother. That's me. That's another brother and sister, my brother, and my mom. Now, all have passed. There's only two of us left, the eldest sister and me, the youngest at the moment. Next slide. That is the person that I try to emulate, which I cannot do as much as what he's done. He was the one who was involved in politics, and this book was done for his funeral. He had a state funeral when he died in 2008. And next slide. Just giving you pictures of all the people that he was involved with. You've got Ahmed Kathrada, Nelson Mandela, Praveen Gordon, and his wife. He spent 20 years on Robben Island and was charged for sabotage in 1964 with Mandela. And Mandela spent 27 years. Ahmed Kathrada also 27 years. So you find that this is his group of people that were in prison. Next slide. That's the husband and wife. Next slide. Now, this is a typical card that all these prisoners had been provided by the authorities. And it tells you how many years a sentence, 20 years. And this is the Afrikaans language that was used. And he was charged for sabotage. That's his number. And here is the date that he went in and the date that he came out. And he spent 20 full years in prison on Robben Island. Next slide. Now, this is a standard birth certificate. And when I went through to look for my roots, this is how I got to my roots. If you look at the birth certificate closely, you find here, it says passenger. This is what I'm reading, but you'll have to take it for granted that I'm correct. It's passenger, and these are the numbers for my grandfather, and that's my mother. Now here, my father is his number, and he became free after he spent the indentureship. And he went to work as a greaser on a ship. But when he came to South Africa, and I'm going to go to the next slide, the next one. Yeah, right. This is a screenshot of the ship's list that shows my father. That's him. That's his father, and this is his name. And they put Itinian Naya, and if you look at the whole ship's list for the South African group, this is the only person who has this name. And why they put this name? Because the guy couldn't spell Krishna or Christian or Kistan. So he went and put Itinian. And he came in at age 20, height. And this is where he came from, the village of Malabar. And I think that's village. And this is Palgat. And as we talked about this one in the last session or the one before that, is the police station where the station master had knowledge of the whole area. And Kundalacheri is the village name. And this was a ship, the arrival ship and the port of departure, July 1904, the SS Pongola, that's how they used to call them, and it's 47, Madras. And that's where he boarded the ship. And his employer was the Durban Corporation for Durban Service. Now, the Durban Corporation provided cleaning services and sanitation and all kinds of city municipal work for the city of Durban. But the story goes that he was a what we call a person with short temper. He had a fight and he quit. And he escaped and went on to work on the sugar boats. And when he went to work on the sugar boats, that's when he became a greaser to work in the engine room. So he used to transport sugar from the port, from the northern part of the Nuttall that I showed, and go to the south, which is towards what we call Port Elizabeth today. And he used to transport sugar back and forth. Next slide. This is my wife's paternal grandfather. I found his ship's list screenshot. And here he came from Trishnopoli. That's the word that Mr. Subramani was talking about. Or Mr. Perumal was talking about. Trishnopoli. And there's the police station, and that's the village. It's quite a big name, and I can't even pronounce that. And they came in 1904, and he came on the different ship, the Quatambaro, the fort, and he came from Madras. And he was employed by Thomas Hall. And he was working in the town of Moy River. So the employer employed them in their homes and their offices. So people were not only brought for working on the sugar plantations, they were also brought to work in the city municipal works and also offices and office complexes. Some of them were housemaids. The children were gardeners and were working in the fields. They had a lot of child labor. And I know of people that I had friendships with, and they told me when I lived in Verulam in the Tom Murugan's group, which is another indentured laborers family, they said that they were used as child labor to pick up the sugarcane and give them to the planters in the fields. So they took advantage of the Indians as bad as they took advantage of the African slaves. Next slide. This is my wedding in 1966. Traditional, where the handover ceremony. My parents were had passed on, and my wife's parents also had passed on. So uncle and my uncle exchanged hands and accepted one another's hands as in the what we call tradition of Indian marriages. Next slide. Now, this is my teaching career within the Indian schools. Now, why I'm showing this is we in South Africa at that time, starting in 1940s, were subjected to live separately. Two things have happened. One, the local communities got together and started building schools, and they called them government-aided schools. Here's one here, government-aided. That means the community built it with community funds. Then in the 60s, after what we call the movement of Indians from areas into, I would use the word Bantustans or townships. And in here we've got Chatsworth, Karwastan, Avoca area, and other areas in South Africa where Indians were parceled to live in their own communities. And they had to build schools. And I started working in Chatsworth Unit 2, and that was the first school that was built in that unit to accommodate people that came from the magazine barracks area. And some of them went into Unit 3, which is another unit adjoining this unit. And we moved. And once I qualified, I went into different schools and ended up in Avoca Primary, which is in another suburb of Durban. So education evolved and continued to change when the time the Indians were given a little bit of leeway to form their own councils. And these councils had the education department, they had to control that, and they continued including. Now, the basic purpose of these schools is to keep them separate so that they can control them, and they cannot. But my family, and when I talk about my brother in a different scenario, we had to fight back and not respect these Indian council members because they were there to say what the white establishment was saying. And we in the Congress movement were fighting back. And then when the time, the African National Congress was born in the 60s, we found that we had to change tactics and do what we had to do to get independence and freedom. Next slide. That's me in later years. My wife and I, Mohini, and she was I would say, my backbone and my counterpart and my, I don't know what else I can use, what other descriptions. She was part and parcel of my life, but she left me almost 3 years ago, and I'm alone today. But she is still in spirit, and she's the one who goaded me, guided me, assisted me in all my ventures. And that is why I wanted to present her to the diaspora, that she and I are like two peas in a pod, where we were two peas in a pod. Next slide. That's the school that I taught at, and I think one of the participants is in this photograph. That's the principal, that's vice principal, that's me. And I think this is Naren. I hope that's him. And this is a group of children, that some of them may be doctors, lawyers, teachers. And talking about doctors, lawyers, and teachers, the Indian community, when we did what we call follow a pattern, every family was either pushing their children to become doctors, lawyers, teachers, or business people. And that became the tradition, the value system. And everyone was goaded or pushed or encouraged to go in that direction. That is why you find that families have children well educated, and a previous speaker, what we call alluded to that the Indians were, who is the one who spoke about Indian diaspora? We accepted the community as a community, and we pushed our values to our children to become better citizens in the community and become a whole cohesive organization. So that is what we taught. That is what I'm sure most of these children are carrying today. Next slide. That's us out of a family of seven children. We are the two last living souls. She's the eldest, 95, just celebrated her birthday in February of this year. And I am 78, will be 79 in July of this year. So we were celebrating her birthday. She's been living in Germany for almost 60 years. Next slide. Now, monuments. Together with all the temples that we talked about that my grandfather built and other temple builders, Sastry College, a most famous college in South Africa that was named after Srinivasa Sastry, who was the agent, British agent to South Africa during the British colonial era. And in honor of him, they set up this college, and most of the students went through that. And now, after 1960, there were other high schools built around South Africa. And they also have very significant, what we call educated Indian students. Today, after 1994, all the schools have become public, and there's a lot of private schools operating, and there's all areas of education followed in universities, colleges, and public high schools and public primary schools.
Mr. Nair, this presentation has been so rich, and I really hate to interrupt you. However, it is now 5 p.m. and we really need to bring it to a close.
Okay, I'll do that. Sorry about that. And, you know, it's much too much. So these are the monuments that I talk about that is living today. Next slide. Now, these are the credits. And this is where I end, because I am giving credits to those people that I researched and put this presentation together. And I hope my presentation was good. And last but not least, I want to thank the ICC for allowing me to do my presentation, and looking forward to another session. Hopefully that I don't exceed my time limit the next time, because the next one will be even richer, because South Africa has a rich Indian diaspora. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. This really was remarkable. And I'm not going to say too much because there are some people who have been commenting, and I want to ask, although no one has put up their hand to ask a question, I want to ask Mr. Naren Ganesh to unmute. And Mr. Ganesh, because you indicated to us how you know Mr. Nair, for the benefit of those people who are on YouTube, I would like you to please just tell him thank you on our behalf.
Oops.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you. Hey, Naren.
Mr. Nair, you know, had it not been for social media, we probably would have never met after so many years. I just want to say, you know, I'd like to say thank you as a student of yours, you know, so many years, more than almost 5 decades ago. But it was through teachers like you that molded students like us into believing in justice, fairness, and quality. And your pedigree, especially with your brother, who I had the opportunity to meet the day he was released from Robben Island, Mr. Billy Naya. And, you know, all I can say is thank you. There's not much we can tell our gurus except thank you very much for giving us the opportunity. You know, with education degrading the way it is in South Africa, we as students of those of the year and of your can only say thank you to gurus who molded us. And I am very, very appreciative. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Wow.
Wow. So there is a comment. There's a comment here from Kevin Bardeles, who is from Belize. He says, thanks, Mr. Nair, for sharing your research, its challenges and success in telling your story. And this really has been a fantastic session with all 4 speakers. Unfortunately, it is now at 5 p.m. and we really do have to bring the recording session to a close. But I cannot thank each of you enough, Mr. Piramal, Mr. Dindial, Dr. Thomas, and Eugene. It really has been such rich information. And, you know, as was just said, as gurus, we really do have to, I don't know whether or not monuments are sufficient, but you all have taught us so much just from your life examples and from your learning that it is, it's really an honor to be in your presence and to have heard you live and direct. So I want to thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, we must bring it to an end, unfortunately. And so I would say this is it for me. Thank you all for being here. And I'll turn you over now to the chair, Shakira.
Thank you, Shalama. And thank you all for taking the time to participate, and especially to the speakers. And as we've said before, the public meeting is being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center and the Amina Ghafoor Institute for the Study of Indentureship and its Legacies, led by Professor David Davidine. And today's edition of our program is being supported by the Sport and Culture Fund of the Office of the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. You can feel free to contact the ICC to publish your books and your reports. And remember, we are asking you kindly give us your suggestions as well as donations. And you can contact Dr. Mahabir for further details. And we want to thank the advisory and planning team led by Dr. Mahabir, and to the IT manager behind the scenes, Ravin Ram Singh. Our topic next Sunday will be traditional and alternative healing practices in the Indian diaspora. So please visit our YouTube channel to see all our past recordings. I am Shakira Mohammed of Trinidad and Tobago saying goodbye. May God bless you all. Dhanyavad.